to the state. Now, this happened after the Enabling Act, which allowed the territory of South Dakota, North Dakota, Montana, and Washington to become states of the Union. And one of the conditions of statehood was that they would disclaim jurisdiction over Indians on reservations. And so this has created a huge problem, which Tatewin is going to discuss, the jurisdictional area. But the upshot of it is that the county, it became part of the state, and it was challenged in 1975 by a person named Donald Cook, who was an Indian from California, who challenged the jurisdiction of the state in Bennett County, saying that he was an Indian and he was not subject to the laws of the state. So that went to the district court under Judge Bogue, and he ruled that the law did convey the land to the state of South Dakota, except for the allotted lands remaining in Bennett County, and that the intent of Congress was to diminish the Pioneers Reservation. So he had to look at the language in the law that said that the land would be ceded, meaning transferred from one government to another, transferred from the federal government to the state government, and that Indians who had allotments in Bennett County could select an allotment on the diminished reservation, meaning they could move to the outside of Bennett County over in Shannon County. And so as a result, we have a checkerboard area in Bennett County. We have some Indian land, allotted land, trust land, and we have unallotted lands which are subject to tax by the state. And now Craig is going to get into this a little bit more, but anytime a state government has to provide education services for its students, not only on reservation but also in military establishments, they are allowed federal funding in lieu of property taxes. I think that's called 874 money. And so they've been getting that for years, not only Bennett County but Shannon County, Pennington County up near Ellsworth Air Force Base, a military base. So there is funding for them, and so they're not. But these are some of the things that they should have dealt with way back when they convinced Congress that they should have the land. It was just a. It was a. I think it was advanced by greed. They wanted land, and we had too much land. So they said. Not that they knew. I'm sure they knew we didn't have too much land, but they just used that as a pretext to get onto the reservation, and consequently we end up with the many settlers on the reservations, not only in Bennett County but also in Jackson County and Shannon County. And so all of our reservations, although on a map it looks like we have this much land, we really don't. So that's the situation in Bennett County now, and so now they're talking about the approaching Congress for more money, which Craig just mentioned a while ago. So that's the historical background of it.
Okay, thank you, Patrick.
If I just want to add a little bit more to the historical background.
Sure.
So from archaeological evidence, we know American Indians have been here for 12,000 years, 12,700 years. That's really solid archaeological evidence, indisputable. So all of North America was American Indian land for 12,700 years. The first time this land that is Bennett County was mentioned by the United States, it was within the 1851 Fort Laramie Treaty. And this land that's Bennett County was in that treaty land, identified as Lakota land. Then in 1868, the 1868 Fort Laramie Treaty, the land that is now Bennett County was in the reservation. There were 3 statuses of land in that 1868 Fort Laramie Treaty: the reservation, unceded lands, and hunting territory. This Bennett County, what is now Bennett County, didn't exist then, but the land did, and it was within the reservation portion of 1868 Fort Laramie Treaty. Then the United States took the Black Hills in 1877 through that 1877 Act, And when they took that land, what is now Bennett County still was within the Great Sioux Reservation. And then when the United States took more land in 1889 and divided the Great Sioux Reservation into these 5 Lakota reservations we have today in this state, Bennett County still was in the Pine Ridge Reservation. So all through legal history, this county, the land that is now Bennett County, has been Indian land. And then when the county was organized in 1911 or 12, it's right there is when this was organized, that land was all American Indian land. Today, 25% of that land is still trust land. In those years from 1913 to today, so 100 and whatever, 4 years, if my math is right, in 104 years, the Bennett County trust land has gone from 100% to 25%. And it's a constant loss. And this is what they're now, one of the issues here is the county commissioners, by the way, 60% of Bennett County is American Indian, 60% of the residents. Population, yep. 60% American Indians. There are 5 county commissioners. None of them are American Indian. None of them can own American Indian trust land. But they're the ones that want all these resources. They're the ones demanding money for that. And they provide no services to that trust land. They cannot provide those. But that's what they're arguing in the false statements that they make in this resolution. So that's a little bit more about the background, I think, of the history of this land that is Bennett County.
Okay. Let's pass the mic over to Mario on the end. We have Mario Gonzalez. And continue our kind of an introduction for each of our panelists.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me to be here. I just want to add to the historical discussion that a lot of this has to do with the reservation policy of the federal government in the 1850s. They decided that they wanted to create reservations. And so they wanted to open up the middle of the U.S., and the reason they wanted reservations to make Indians farmers. And therefore, they would confine them to a small area and open up all the rest of the land. So a lot of the Fort Laramie Treaty is a result of that. It's basically a definition of Sioux land and other lands that were considered, I guess, reservations. And then you get to the 1860s, and you have the peace policy of the federal government after the Civil War, and our 68 treaty is a result of that. But you notice in that treaty, there's still idea of making Indians farmers. You know, so we have the treaty allotments, and to make Indians farmers, trying to encourage them to get on allotments, treaty allotments. And there were still some treaty allotments even, you know, as recently as like 1980s. I think the Antones over in Rosebud filed a treaty allotment case, and they won compensation for that. So then you get into, as indicated here, you have the Great Sioux Reservation being created, the Black Hills being diminished out of that, the remainder of the Great Sioux Reservation is still intact. There's about 26 million acres after the 1868 treaty created the reservation, so it's a 26 million acre reservation. Black Hills is about 7.2 million acres taken out of it, confiscated out of it, and then there's about 18 million acres left over. So they want to take half of that, create 9 million acres in smaller reservations, and open up 8 million acres more for non-Indian settlements. So that's what they did. This 1889 Act was basically pushed on the Sioux. We showed that they never got the consent of the Indians on that. I filed an action against the Army Corps of Engineers a few years ago because I saw an opportunity to you know, make a historical record on it, that we never agreed to the 89 Act. So when they passed the Mitigation Act, it said that you can't transfer any of those Corps lands if they're in the reservations. I said, okay, I'm going to walk through the door here and show you that there's no, it's all reservation yet. The boundary should be on the East Bank. So I raised that issue. I presented enough evidence that they never got the 3/4 signatures, just on non-Indian, underage Indians and white people that signed it brought under 3/4. Well, Judge Kessler, you know, said, well, I sympathize with the Oglala Sioux. You know, it's true that they never got the signatures, but Congress relied on it later, and therefore made it a legal act. Well, that's not really very good reasoning, because it was a bilateral act. Section 28 of the 89 Act said that that this act shall not be valid, it'd be null and void if you don't have the requisite signatures. Well, they don't have them. So then you have a court decision saying, yeah, we sympathize with you, but these later acts, unilateral acts, relied on it, therefore made a legal act. So it's totally absurd. But we did accomplish one thing with that Mitigation Act. We were in court. They had to transfer the land all the way to Nebraska, and the Oglala Sioux tribe tried to participate. They said, no, you're not a river tribe. Senator Daschle, they went to John Steele in the meeting room. So we nevertheless filed our lawsuit, and we were in court from 2001 to 2011. 1999 to 2011, and they could only have 10 years to transfer that, and our court case was in court over 10 years, so we stopped, Oglala Sioux tribe stopped the transfer of all that Army Corps land to the state of South Dakota. That's why it's not transferred. It was our tribe that did that, and we're not a river tribe either, but that's what they say anyway. I think we are. So nevertheless, what the 89 Act's important, because even though we don't really acknowledge it, Section 8 to 12 has allotment provisions. So we were not allotted under the 1877 Dawes Act. We were allotted under the 1889 Act, which incorporated Section 6 of the Dawes Act, but that was it. Now, Section 9 of that Act is really important because it says these provisions, these sections as to allotments, will not be valid unless 3/4 of the adult Indians, not male, but adult Indians on each of these Sioux reservations agree to these allotments. So what happened? 89, the Oglala Sioux said, we don't want these allotments. And they started opposing it. There's a little faction that wanted them, but majority of our people did not want these allotments on our reservation. So they had to fight. There was a petition signed by, I think, 1,600 of our tribal members saying, we don't want these allotments. You know what happened? The government just ignored that. 1904, they started allotting our reservations in violation of Section 9. And that's why we got all these allotments here in violation that we didn't want, and it created all this mess, airship problems. And so the instructions went out to the Secretary of Interior, to Charlie Bates. Batesland's named after him. He was our allotting agent, and they instructed him to allot the reservations with some exceptions. They said reserve land over in Pine Ridge and elsewhere for governmental purposes. That's called agency reserve land today. It's still agency reserve, but the reservation was allotted out under that 1889 Act. And so then we have these allotments, and they were for 24 years, 25 years trust, and then the president could extend it. Well, what happened? There was an act passed in 1906. I can't remember what congressman was that. Pat, do you remember? 1906. There was an act saying that the secretary can issue allotments, patents to these lands, even though the 25 years did not expire. So the secretary sent out competency commissions, and they started looking at every individual on our reservation that had that they thought was competent, and they forced these patents on them. And under that Allotment Act, at that time, you couldn't be a tribal member or U.S. citizen at the same time. So everybody got their fee patent under the 89 Act. They became a U.S. citizen, lost their tribal membership. So we have this whole list of people that were no longer tribal members in the early 1900s. And I hear some of our traditional people always bringing that up. These people shouldn't be tribal members. Nevertheless, Congress canceled these force fee patents, 1922 cancellation acts. And those that individuals still had them, taxes were paid, they put them back into trust. But a lot of our land was lost under those force fee patents. That's why you have all these non-Indians in Jackson County and Sevier and Shannon County and Bennett counties. A lot of this land was lost through force fee patents. Okay, so that was 1904. And then what happened was that in 1934, you passed the Indian Reorganization Act. Well, the Indian Reorganization Act had Section 2 said that no more allotments, and it also said that those surplus lands on all these reservations would no longer be open for white settlement. So the 34 Act did do that. That was an enticement, I think, to the Sioux people to agree to the IRA. That's some of the enticements. Okay, so then we come to 1910. And it actually started in 1904 with the Gregory County Act and this track over here south of Pine Ridge, this Pine Ridge extension, 50 square miles. Theodore Roosevelt opened that up to homesteading. And the same thing, Pat. There were some allotments, black ward-bounded allotments, some were down there, and they said, move to the reservation, get allotments, open that up. So, they opened that whole area up, and then they found out, Theodore Roosevelt found out that, hey, this one section on there is part of the Pine Ridge irrigation system, the school. So he amended it, took that on. Today it's still reservation. That's where we have our nursing home. Okay, so then the Bennett County Act, basically, there's some court cases that say that didn't diminish the reservation. Newton Cummings had a case out here called United States versus Bennett County, and it said that wasn't diminished. It's part of our reservation. Then you had the Putnam case come down to Edison Ward. Start enticing, some others said, start trying to get people to get their free patents over there. So they charged them in federal court in U.S. versus Putnam. And they said, you can't, there's a statute there that said you can't entice an Indian to sell his allotments. And so they cited that and ruled against those people that were trying to convince tribal members to get their free patents. Stop that. Okay, so then what happens is that we come up to the present time. We have these cases that say that Bennett County was not diminished, and then we have the Cook versus Parkinson case, 1975. And like Pat said, it was a California Indian named Cook who went in a criminal case. You could say, hey, Bennett County, you can't prosecute me because this is still a reservation under federal jurisdiction. So he raised that issue, and it went to from district. Judge Bogue ruled against not the tribe. Tribe wasn't involved, so we're not a party to that, neither was the U.S. government. So basically, our Constitution says that's still a reservation. That's probably what we should be sticking to, because we were not a party to that. If we were going to go to court, we could still challenge, that. I think that decision. I don't know if I don't think it's binding on us, Cook versus Parkinson. But anyway, all of a sudden the maps changed, and based on that. So cartographers have a good interest in diminishing our reservations by redoing our maps, and then we start believing that. That's the way it is. Okay, so Cook versus Parkinson basically said Bennett County is diminished. Now, there's a difference between disestablishment and diminished. A disestablished reservation is where it's no longer a reservation. It's just, the reservation doesn't exist except maybe for a lot of lands that are checkerboarded. But a diminished reservation doesn't diminish the reservation. It just reduces the boundaries, but the land within it is still part of the reservation. So you have these earlier cases say that all the trust land over there is still reservation. Then I don't know, Cook versus Parkinson seems to dispute that idea. But nevertheless, I think that before that Cook versus Parkinson can change those earlier cases, it takes an in-bank panel to do that. 3 judges can't change a prior decision of 3 panel. So it takes a full court in bank, and I don't think that ever occurs. So we get to the present time now, where we have a checkerboard jurisdiction over there. We have the housing, they did put that water tower by the school. That should have been ours. IHS put that in, gave it to the city, I guess, so we paid for it. Paid for the road over there to Allen Roads. We issued a bond to help them out on that. So we've been helping provide some of the services over there in Bennett County, but nevertheless, they are having financial difficulties. I understand it. Now, in the Black Hills, there's a special act of Congress that gives 1/4 of all the income off the Black Hills, the timber, to those county schools. And Fall River, Custer, and Pennington, and Lawrence County, I guess, that whole area, they get 1/4 all the income off the timber, our timber, and resources up there to subsidize the schools. And I guess they're kind of looking at the same thing here in Bennett County. They have been getting federal impact aid. Johnson O'Malley, was it Title VI? Title VI money. And so we've been basically helping them out with, because of our students' eligibility to, access those funds. So you have this history here. We never ceded that area. And I also want to add, in docket 117 in 1980s, we made sure that we took Bennett County, the payment for the land in Bennett County, out of docket 117. The council approved it like that. We got Tim Coulter to represent us in docket 117 to finish that up. It was supposed to be a settlement, and part of it was for payment for the Bennett County lands that they took. So we said, no way, we're not selling any lands in Bennett County. And so we had that amended, and we took that out, and we got, I think, $180,000 ended up as compensation for our county claim, docket 117. Then we turned around, we gave 60,000, if I remember right, to the treaty council to, have money to operate on in 1980s. So 120,000 went to the tribe. That ended docket 117. So, we have this history of Bennett County where, we don't have good feelings about the way that all occurred, how they confiscated that land, opened it up to surplus lands, supposedly gave us money, we rejected it in docket 117. So we're here, they have a problem here. We do have kids there, so we can't just ignore that fact too. But on the other hand, do we really want to, allow them to proceed the way they're proceeding here and try to get, federal funds in lieu of impact aid? I'm not sure, what the answer to that is. We do have to look after our kids over there too. There are a lot of kids over there, so they deserve a quality education. So it isn't just say, hey, we're against you entirely, you're not getting this money, because it really affects our kids too over there, a lot of kids. So what's the solution? I guess that's why we're here today. Tate?
Thank you very much, Mario.
What's the solution?
We're going to come to a little bit more present day after hearing some of the history of where we're at with Bennett County and how it came to be. Let's talk. We have Tatewin Means here to look at both criminal and civil jurisdiction. That's what we're talking about today now. Where does it leave us today and the problems that are created by this history of how Bennett County came about? And we have to deal with that present day, every day. How do we deal with that?
Well, good afternoon, everybody that's here and those tuning in, listening, trying to educate ourselves on what's going on in Bennett County. So I appreciate this opportunity and being welcomed on the panel. But I was the Attorney General for the Oglala Sioux Tribe from 2012 to 2017, just earlier this year. I resigned in April of this year, but during that time, it became apparent the many jurisdictional difficulties and problems with all of our bordering counties, especially Jackson County, Bennett County, and then Pennington. And we came up with one good solution, at least, as it dealt with crimes committed by non-Indians within Oglala Lakota County, and that was to for me to be sworn in as a deputy state's attorney so I could prosecute non-Indians that commit wholly non-Indian crimes or victimless crimes on the reservation. But that came out of a lot of conversations and people that were in agreement that some other type of innovative solution needed to be found in order to address crimes by non-Indians on reservations anyways. And in those conversations, I had several conversations with at that time, the state's attorney, Ken Orak. He was the state's attorney in Bennett County for many of the years that I was the attorney general. And his primary concern was juvenile crime and the fluctuation of our juvenile population back and forth into reservation communities and then into Bennett County, or going off or what he considered off reservation to commit crimes, and then them not being able to serve them or fine them to hold them accountable. And so those problems were ever present when I came on board. And just for general information, obviously, Dr. Howe correctly notes in his memorandum that the state does not have jurisdiction on those trust lands in what is considered Bennett County. So Sunrise Housing, and there's a portion in the town of Martin that the state police do not have jurisdiction, the courts do not have jurisdiction over crimes committed there. Our police, our tribal police, provide the services. So it's not as though Bennett County is there, protecting and serving and holding people accountable. From time to time, they are called upon to assist our tribal police, and those are in very limited circumstances. But if officers are limited, are numbered, but there's an emergency happening, say in Sunrise Housing, Bennett County Police might be called upon to just go and hold the scene until our tribal police can get there. But it's always that our tribal police have that jurisdiction and authority to act and enforce tribal law. So state law does not apply in those specific areas. So it is absolutely incorrect what's stated in the Bennett County resolution about them providing all of these services and pouring all this money into these trust lands for our residents there. And that is absolutely incorrect. It's the tribal dollars, tribal money that is supporting the citizens living there. So.
Okay. We have also with us Ted Hamilton, and we've definitely heard about Impact Aid, and then Mario mentioned something about JOM funding. Let's talk a little bit about that and the challenges that Bennett County provides or lays out there for us in these areas.
Good afternoon. My name's Ted Hamilton. As Tom said, I've lived here since 1986, and I'm a resident of Porcupine. So I kind of know where Bennett County is. I've been there, but it's not on my day-to-day radar. And I got this email that had this statement from the commissioners, and Craig Howell had made some really good comments to it. And I'm really excited that we're at Woksape Tipi, because the purpose of this building that we put up back in the 80s was to allow us to find out some facts. And so I wrote an email, which I think got me on this panel, which asks us to look at some facts. And we are in an era of alternative facts, or whatever we're going to call them nowadays. But I went and I pulled up the audit for Bennett County's school system. One of the things that they talk about in this document is how the county tax revenue is insufficient to support. And they mention the schools. And I spent 6 years as a school superintendent. I spent another 8 years working at Todd County in their administration. So I know a little bit about federal impact aid. Actually went out to D.C. and worked with federal impact aid lobbying and those kinds of pieces in my background. But I thought it was interesting, and anybody who wants to find the facts can go to the Bennett County website and pull down their audit, which I did. That's what all these papers are sitting in front of me for the people at KOLC can see me looking at papers. It's interesting to me that Bennett County schools, and I'll focus on the schools because I can't speak to the county services, but at the schools, they have a general revenue from 2015 of $7.1 million. That's what it says in their audit. It's kind of right here, and you can pull it down off their website. It also tells us that their actual expenditures from year to year is $5.997 million. So they actually bring in more money than they need, which I thought was interesting. I also thought it was interesting that their federal revenue resources is $3.9 million. Their state revenue, which comes from the money that Piya puts into the state schools as part of the overall state revenue. So every student who goes to a state school, the legislature, as part of the constitution of the state, pays money for every student. So that's $2.1 million. Well, there you got $6 million. They do have on their audit a tax revenue of $1.175 million, which I can't see that they actually need. So somehow, and I learned something every time I talk to Dr. Howe. He's always full of information. He told us a minute ago that 25% of the land is federal land. I didn't know this about Bennett County. So basically, 25% of the land is generating half of the school's income. The other half comes from the state coffers, and the 75% is generating money that is now part of the $25 million that Bennett County Schools has in investment accounts. So they actually have enough money to run their schools for 4 years without taking money from anybody, and they appear to have enough resources coming in from the impact aid, which is a replacement of county taxes, which they actually get more impact aid money per acre than they do from the state or the county taxes. So I couldn't understand this. I thought, all right, I'll put this out in an email to kind of say this. And I said in my email, I don't want to be political about this. I think this is an opportunity to look at facts. This is not it, but this is a really weirdly written document from these guys at the commission. The other piece that's important, and Maggie asked me about this, so I'll speak to this. Federal impact aid requires the school that receives it to listen to parents. And so the parents at the school have an opportunity to talk directly to the school budget. There's supposed to be a federal impact aid meeting, at least a minimum of one per year. Most schools have 2 or 3 or 4. And if the parents at any time feel that their students are not being well served, then they can write to the tribal chair, and the tribal chair can write to the Department of Education. And the Department of Education will then cut off federal impact aid funds and hold a hearing and hold accountable that county school or that school system to make sure that the needs of tribal people are being met. And that's in the federal impact aid law. You can pull that down. It's Title 7 Impact Aid, Section 7004. You can pull it right off of the Federal Impact Aid website. So this is all public knowledge. There have been cases in South Dakota. Sisseton is probably the one that I know most recently, where the Department of Education had a similar issue with the Sisseton Public Schools, and the tribe and the tribal chair up at Sisseton, Wahpeton, wrote a letter. They cut off their federal impact aid funds, or threatened to anyway. They had a series of hearings, and now up there we now have Native people on their school board, which we didn't have before. I don't know much about Bennett County School Board. I do know that it makes sense to me that Lakota people would run for the school board and be part of this process. I don't know how they manage their regular meetings about federal impact aid. I would hope that they would be involving Lakota people in that process, because they're supposed to be. An additional fund most people know about that goes specifically to public schools but not tribal grant schools like Little Wound and others is Johnson O'Malley funds, and Mario talked about them. They also have a parent advisory committee process that is supposed to be working. So there's opportunities for conversation. And when I read this piece that Dr. Howe sent out and his comments, the biggest thing that I see here is the lack of conversation. What does the old movie say? We have a failure to communicate here. And the people of Bennett County who wrote this don't seem to have communicated well with what are the real issues and what's the real facts of what's going on. So I don't know if that lends any light to this conversation or not, but I do encourage people. You can pull down the audits, you can look at how they're getting money, and it is not fair, as it says in this document, to say that Native people are really drawing on that county, because from what I can see, at least from their schools' perspective, from the perspective of their schools, which is probably the biggest governmental service at Bennett County, from the schools' perspective, the federal system is paying for the big hunk, the share of how that school system runs. So I don't know if that's lends light to this conversation or not, but
Thank you very much, Ted. We are at the Woksape Tipi of Oglala Lakota College here at 3 Mile Creek and the Piya Wiconi campus. We have with us Dr. Craig Howell, Mr. Pat Lee, Tatewin Means, Ted Hamilton, and Mario Gonzalez. We're talking about Bennett County. We've laid kind of the history and the foundation of Bennett County and how it came about. We've heard looking at the jurisdiction, criminal and civil, and looked at Impact Aid and JOM funding. Where do we go from here? Are we still part of this, what do I want to say, diminishing process? Forever and a day I hear that there is creeping state jurisdiction on lands. In current day, there's talk about turning reservations into corporations and moving away from trust land and so forth. So where are we at today and where are we going? Are we at the will of somebody else? Are we continuing to see the diminishment of Oglala Lakota Nation? And where does Bennett County fit in that? Are they part of that process? Where do we go from today? We'll go back to Craig Howell here and start there.
I wish I had an answer that could solve the problem, but these problems, I think, are deep-seated and historical. So this idea that there's a solution we're going to find today, or this afternoon, I just don't think is possible. I wish. So where we could go from here, we meaning who? If we're talking about Bennett County as realized through these commissioners, we could take they should take Ted's advice and start a conversation. The Bennett County commissioners can't get along with the city commissioners. And so they're doing all these things that are impacting American Indian lands and tribal citizens, but they don't work with the tribe or with tribal citizens. Last year, the only American Indian on the commission died in office, and they replaced him with a non-Indian. The attitude in Bennett County, by and large, is that there's just too many, it seems that there's too many Indians in the county from their viewpoint. And that these Indians, according to this resolution, are causing the problems in the county. These Indians are unemployed, they're alcoholics, they're drug users, they're criminals. And because of those factors, then the county is going broke trying to due to court costs and legal fees. This is racist, but that's their position. That's what they're advocating here. And that deep-seated racism in our state and in Bennett County has to be said. And people have to, I think it's like a 12-step program, I guess. I don't know. If you don't know you're a racist, you don't, or you can't recognize it in a legal document, then you aren't going to be able to solve it. So we have to be able to call this out and say these are fundamental problems. We can see it strictly against Indians in this case. They're arguing that they're out of money, but what's their plan B? They don't have a plan B. Their line item for economic development for Bennett County is zero. They've been working on this for over 12 years, and they've failed every time. But we, county residents, we're paying taxes so that our lawyers can go to D.C. and defend this stuff. And it's wrong. So it's not about money, it's about Indians and Indian land. And we just have to be clear about that. And I think in order for the county to be able to do a better conversation, we need to change the structure of how these county commissioners are elected. Right now, they're elected at large, all 5 county commissioners. There's none of them that live north of 18 or west of 73. A really a small area where they're living, all of them are non-Indians. If we divided our county into districts, then we could, 3 of the 5 commissioners should be American Indian if we're proportional. So somehow we need to get a better conversation within the county commissioners, not just between the commissioners and others, I think. So I wish I had a solution. I'm not arguing for a solution here. What we're really trying to do is just identify the problems in this type of resolution and stop it.
You know, we don't have an official representative of the Oglala Lakota Nation, per se, the Oglala Sioux tribe, that's on the panel. So the question is, what role does the Oglala Lakota Nation have when we're talking about Bennett County? Is there leadership there? Is there a sense of direction? Or do they care? Is Bennett County just going to continue to slip away and get less and less?
Tom, I want to address your earlier questions on the corporations and what's happening on a national level. I think Secretary Zinke, Secretary of Interior, made a statement recently that tribes should start thinking about forming corporations and dealing through corporations. What he's referring to is what happened in Alaska. And what happened in Alaska was that they looked at all the things that happened in lower 48, and then they tried to use that as a basis to really subjugate those tribes up there. They're really in bad shape in Alaska now because of the way the federal government implemented the ANSCA. But in Alaska, it was all Aboriginal Indian title up there. And in 1955, in the Tatewin case, Supreme Court said, well, if it's Aboriginal title, it's not protected by the Fifth Amendment. Therefore, this tribe has its Tongass national grasslands, even though you're taking timber off from it, and that's their land, you don't have to pay for it, because it's not compensable under the Fifth Amendment. It's Aboriginal title. To come under the Fifth Amendment, you have to have a treaty or an act of Congress recognizing it, and it comes under the Fifth Amendment, but then you have to pay them. So they didn't have to pay with all that timber taken off, the grasslands of this tribe up there. What happened was, because of the Tatewin case, Alaska became a state in 1958, and they took all there's 360 million acres up there of Aboriginal title land to begin with. So they gave 100 million acres to the state of Alaska. Just give it to them. It belongs to the natives. In 1958. Then they finally, in 1971, Senator Stevens and the people up there said, well, let's settle this. So they passed ANSCO, Native American, Alaskan Native Settlement Act. And in that act, they said, okay, you natives, we're going to recognize your title to 40 million acres. It turned out to be 44 later. And so we will give you recognized title to it. It'll no longer be Aboriginal title. Then they re-recognized 100 million that they gave to the state in 1958. And then the government said, okay, and then we're keeping the rest, about 220 million acres. Of course, it's the North Slope and all this other land. So then the Alaska Natives end up, here's what the act says. You have to form state corporations. You have to transfer all your land to these state corporations, and you can all pick whoever you want to be a shareholder in, and then that's going to manage your land. So the tribes up there, all their land was taken away from them. Recently, I guess they just held it. Of course, they just held it. There's still tribal recognized governments and eligible for federal benefits. But there's only one tribe that said, okay, I guess we're stuck with this 1971 Settlement Act. So what they did, the Veneti tribe said, we're going to transfer this to a corporation, transfer it back. And so they ended up transferring their trust land to a corporation, transferring it back in fee. And then in the Veneti case, they said it's no longer Indian country. It's fee land now, not trust land. So, that's the situation in Alaska. We don't want that down here. We don't want these corporations. I don't know what this Zinke guy is talking about, but, if it's up to us, I don't think that's going to happen down here. We're not going to be, our lands stripped away from us like in Alaska. Now, there is a movement on. There's a new bill passed hearings last week, I guess. Our tribes didn't even testify on that, but I guess it came up in NCI. I wasn't there. But this bill is proposing that all our trust land be turned into restricted fee land, like in Oklahoma. And so there's a difference, because trust land, the U.S. holds legal title, and the Indian holds beneficial title. So legal title is basically owned by the U.S. on trust land. Well, if you get a restricted fee, you actually get the legal title with restrictions on it. That the state can't tax it, you can't alienate it without federal approval, and for Indian country purposes, it's considered Indian country jurisdictional purposes. So is that a good thing or not? Well, that's one of the things the three affiliate is pushing at. They like it. They want to. He said, restricted fee land, we can use it any way we want. Don't have to be getting permission. We can lease it. I'm not sure if that's good or bad, but it deserves a lot of discussion. So the tribal chairmans, Great Plains tribal chairmans are meeting in Las Vegas, I think on the 10th. And this is one of the main things on their agenda is this proposed bill. So the tribes really should get involved in that process. So that's kind of what's happening on the national level, Tom, in addressing your two questions. And I just want to point out that Section 3 here of the Bennett County 1910 Act, it gives a lot of land to the state for schools. 20% of the income off those sale of those lands are for the schools. So
I want to thank Mr. Gonzalez for this information that he's providing us. I also want to clarify one of the, it's twofold that we have this panel here, and that I was the one that shared the information for the students and the community. And I was glad that Ted picked it up, and I expected someone to pick it up, and, so good old Ted. But anyway, so we have this panel here, providing the information, providing a history of Bennett County, okay, but also looking at the argument. Because I see this as a tremendous educational opportunity for our students and for the community. If you look at the way the argument is put together, okay? That is a lesson that we can all benefit from. It was done very well, and I want students to realize, and instructors and community, to look at the way the argument's put together, because that's how we change things, the way we approach things. And we're really at a very local level here. And I just wanted to add that, and thank you, sir. And then I would like to hear from the rest of you. I don't expect us to solve the problems, but what I do expect is for this to be a teachable moment.
And you are?
I am Michelle May, and I'm the library director. And we put this thing together with the help of Maggie Ross. And perhaps we weren't as clear as we should have been as to the purpose. And for that I apologize, but I hope I've made that clear. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, I have some comments, thoughts that that came to me during the conversation, and I realized that generally Lakota people and Native people, for that matter, do not participate in non-Indian politics. We got the county commissioners and city commissioners in Martin, and I get the feeling that our people are not really involved in the formation of those organizations. And part of it can be explained by the land base. Bennett County has the most of its land base would be around Pass Creek District, where our people do participate. We have a district government there, and we're interested in things that go on with the district. But you get to Lake Creek and there's no land base per se for the district. I mean, it's scattered home sites, Sunrise Housing, North Housing, Heisel community, which is, far out there. And so I think that we culturally, we still recognize it as a district. I mean, we still consider Lake Creek as part of our reservation, even for those who do not live on allotted land, our trust land. For example, Cecilia Firethunder won the presidency several years ago, and she lives in the town of Martin on deeded land. She was not theoretically, she was not a reservation resident. But for all practical matters and legally, she was within the boundary of the reservation. So we still recognize that as our land, as our property. But for some reason, we feel like we're outsiders. I assume that most tribal members feel that they're outsiders when it comes to the school boards, county commissioners, and so on. And so maybe the younger folks need to get more involved in their actual surroundings within the community to participate. Get some word or some force in the county commission and the decisions that are made, especially that impact Indian people.
Patrick, I can imagine that it's harder with the county commissioners.
Right.
But whereas the population of Bennett County is 60% Native American, I have to believe that the population or the enrollment of Bennett County school system is higher than 60% as far as Native American goes. And as parents, I would think that you would want to be involved in what happens in the school and how the school is operated and through the school board. And I think there'd be help me here. Would there be less barriers to running for the school board? Are there any Native Americans on the Bennett County School Board? I mean, that hits right to the crux. If you're a parent, you have a family and you're a parent and you have children going to Bennett County schools, I would think that you would want to have some input in how the school is operating.
Yeah, with the school population consisting mostly of Native students, it would seem like we would develop some kind of ownership. Our school, not their school. That's probably the attitude that we've been ingrained with. It's not our school; it's their school. We just attend their school, and they select their people, and they do their thing, and we do ours. But that's just my thought as I was listening to the comments and all. But maybe perhaps like I say, the younger people get more education in the actual facts of the matter, actually what's going on, and that it is our school to the point where most of the student body is Native American. We could say, you know, change the name to a Martin Indian School or something. I don't know. Those are just some thoughts that I had.
So I think I appreciate the way Pat's phrasing this, but those of us that live in Bennett County, that's
Right.
our school.
Right.
It's not theirs, that's ours. And we're 60%. So I don't see an issue there, but it is, for some reason, American Indians are not represented on the county commissioner. When the county was first established, almost all elected officers were American Indian, all citizens of the Oglala Sioux tribe. That's how the county started. We've gone from almost 100% in positions to almost none. So it's not that this is how it's always been. Well, the conditions we're finding ourselves in now are new. These are not, this isn't how it's been, this isn't how it has to be. And one thing that can happen is we start to think about big pictures and we lose it, because this is something we can change. But to talk about what's the future, I mean, then we're out of doing anything. And this is what happens, I think, a lot of times when a lot of us get frustrated is we want Washington, D.C. to change it, or we want to talk about a long time from now. We have issues right now. Let's see if we can change. Let's affect change now, here. Not federal policy, not the way the tribe operates. Let's change what is being done in Martin today.
There has for a long time been an ambivalence about being involved
Yep.
in the state system, per se, whether it be county commissioners, run for the legislature. Where does that ambivalence come from? Why is it still there? Why has not that changed? How many Native Americans are registered to vote in Bennett County? And then how many people actually come out and vote?
So I don't have the answers to those questions, but we have to be really careful we don't start to blame the Indians.
Yes.
Right? Where are these people? Where are these people? We start to go around and say, how come you aren't doing something? How come you aren't doing something? Well, it's because there's a structural problem in this county. That's not a fault of Indians. This is a structural problem. This is like a structural problem in our state with higher ed, for instance. There are 1,500 faculty members in our 6 universities in our state. 15 are American Indians. 15 out of 1,500. This is a structural problem. So we don't want to blame Indians for not doing things. We got to see what are these structural problems and how can we change those. So I don't want to say how, like for instance, this is the idea of a structural change would be say, let's divide this reservation, organize it into 5 districts. This is what they do when they get into our state legislators are done like this, right? Our legislative districts, ensuring that everyone has representation. Our county will never go that route. They don't want equal representation. There'd be 3 out of the 5 members would be American Indians. So this is a structural thing that we can change, and the result of a structural change like that would be representation on that council. Instead of saying, blaming American Indians or implying that there's a character default in American Indians where they won't run. So I'm really nervous about the way we address things, you know, that who we're blaming for the conditions we find ourselves in.
Right. The question is more not applying or laying blame. It's a question of what we can do to change things and how do we do that. Ted, go ahead. You.
I think Dr. Howe is right on in terms of being careful not to point fingers in a lot of different directions. I am concerned in I approach things from school perspectives. So if you get up in the morning and you go to Martin and you sit at the gas station early in the morning and you watch the yellow school buses, what you'll often see is a couple school buses from Little Wound School going over to Sunrise Housing, or through Martin and picking kids up and taking them to Kyle. You're going to see another school bus from Allen, from American Horse School, go over and pick up some kids and bring them back. You're going to see school buses from Oglala County and Pine Ridge.
Crazy Horse.
And Crazy Horse. So we have a net loss of students who are leaving that school system. Now, I cannot believe that parents are sitting here saying, I want my kid to sit on a bus for 35, 45, an hour, hour and a half, because the school that I'm working with is just opening up arms to us and saying we're a wonderful place. I think what's happened is that we're singing a push out, where schools push students out. We know that we get better special ed services in tribal schools than we do in state schools. We know that we can learn about our culture and our language in tribal schools as in state schools. And so there is a creation of an environment that is not welcoming. The ACLU actually had a case against the Winter School District, and that case allowed the Winter School District to start making some changes. And I think, I'd hope, that those changes have stuck. Now, that's an 8 or 10 year process. But I know that at Bennett County, that ACLU process didn't occur. But you have to give folks a chance to stand up and say, what's really going on? And I think the nature of the problem is that people are getting pushed out. It's easier to send my kid to Little Wound than to deal with systemic and problems in a system. I was looking, and I get back to what Michelle had said about some things here that are said in this document that Craig had written to, and I think he's right on. The federal government encourages Indian people to live here with subsidized housing and social programs. The federal government didn't encourage people to live here, they forced them to live here. That's a very simple statement, and the conversation needs to be had. Folks, your way of looking at the people here is hostile to those people. It is such that it's difficult to have an honest conversation. If you look at the nature of the school board of Bennett County, it appears to me, and it's difficult because, depending upon your, we tend to look at skin color, but there are a bunch of Washichu-looking folks there when it comes right down to it. So I don't know if maybe they are tribal members or not, maybe they are tribal citizens, I don't know. But just looking at that, I'm sitting there saying, okay, do these folks really represent the 50, 60% of those students out there? Are they creating an environment that is welcoming and hopefully open? When I look at this document and they talk about unemployment, what is the county commission, which has an obligation to ask questions about employment, what are they doing to actively develop entrepreneurship in their county? Their statement in here is, we are an agricultural county. Well, we live in a global world. If you're going to be an agricultural county, pretty soon you're going to be like the northwest corner of this state, where your population is going to drop and disappear. You go up north of Sturgis and those county areas, the populations of non-Indians, ranchers, is dropping to a point where they're talking about re-homesteading because they don't have enough people. Their children are leaving. Bennett County is going to move over fairly soon demographically from being a white-dominated community to being, it already has, it is a native-dominated community, except the land base is controlled by a smaller and smaller group of people. So there needs to be conversation, and it can't be us against them. And everything I read in this document is, this is us, this is them, and we've forgotten that people are neighbors, that people are all here, and they need to work together. And I always like to poke fun at Tom a little with his questioning. He made a question about where's the tribe in this conversation. I think one meeting does not determine if they care or not. I think there just needs to be an open conversation. The tribe needs to be part of that. As a government, the tribe needs to be part of a conversation. The people of Bennett County need to be part of a conversation. All I can do is say there are facts, but the real question is, how do we bring people together to go beyond just let's state facts, to say what can we do to build a bridge or do something? Because if we don't do anything, nothing will happen.
Thank you, Ted. We have a comment or a question from one of the members of the audience.
Can they use the microphone? So that people can hear it. Thank you, Harlow.
Thank you. I want to thank the panel. Seems like we have a very prestigious panel. I'd like to maybe talk about, you were talking about solutions. I've been working on a similar solution in our second largest city in the state, Rapid City, South Dakota. It's called the process of community conversation. And in that process, we start with a small meeting, and I was there. And we called for the whole public to attend, but probably maybe 15 Indians and one white person attended the first meeting. Now when they call a meeting, sometimes they have well over 100 people because it started slow. And it's not a process where you can stand on a soapbox and condemn each other. It's a process where you use the idea of creating questions that would give not only long-term solutions, but you go through process such as what would the community look like in the best possible solution. And you go from, they break into groups, and every so often, when one question is asked, you have to move out of your group, and so that eventually you talk to everybody that's there. And the idea is to create conversation. Now, here's a result of that. Like you say, we're in a situation of Rapid, much like Bennett County. We got some land back called Pishla. Some of you are familiar, or most of you are probably familiar. We wanted to put that into trust. And of course, it's in, I believe it's in Custer County, or one of the counties in Pennington County. So it just so happened that a couple of the county commissioners had participated in the community conversation. And because Rapid is getting a lot like Bennett County, in a sense that those people that have lived there for generations and promoting this type of division and racism in their everyday actions, their children are now part of the age of information. They don't want to be like that. Not only that, like you said of Bennett County, most of them don't want to live there. They go out to the urban areas to seek a job that pertains to the education that they received, whether that's as a machinist or whether it's as a teacher, a doctor, a lawyer. So my point is, through this process of community conversation, what's been going on well into about 1.5 years now, it started when the hockey game, remember they threw the beer on the kids from Allen, some Bennett County members. That's what started this whole community conversation. So one of the things that we could do is to bring some of those people in to begin such a process in Bennett County where people talk to each other. And it seemed to me it never worked in Rapid, I thought. But when it came time to vote by the county commissioners as to whether they opposed putting into land over 2,000 acres of trust land in the Black Hills, they didn't agree to support it, but they agreed not to oppose it, which is important. And so the land is now in trust, which I would have thought was totally impossible. And so this is the type of thing that I witnessed that works when you get people to talk to each other. Now, a little bit of family history. My grandfather is one of the founders of the city of Martin. And our family grew up south of Martin, a little town, it's not there anymore, it was called Gamble. And my father had 5 brothers and 1 sister. They all got a lot of land, but one of the tricks of allotment, they gave them their allotments, their 160 acres, in all the outlying counties. Instead of adding to my grandfather's ranch, he was a successful rancher, they gave the allotments, like my dad's in Porcupine. I got another uncle that's north of Norris, on the northeast corner of Pine Ridge Res. And then I got another uncle that had a quarter of land right on Highway 18 in Martin, outside of Martin, west side. So what they did was divide these families. Rather than keep us together, we probably would have had one of the biggest ranches in Bennett County. So that's another tactic that I just wanted to mention. Now, finally, I want to ask, maybe Mario, some of you know, back in the day, I'd say in the late 70s, early 80s, there was a law called Public Law 2415. And they created what they call 2415 land claims. And what this was is the federal government funded this law to research all land that had been taken as a result of illegal taxation. Because they didn't have the authority to tax because we're not a 280 reservation. But they taxed anyway. And they took massive amounts of land, especially in Bennett County, including my grandfather's land. And so I want to know if you guys know of where some of those documents are that we could now use to show how much of actually Bennett County. I heard one figure that it was over not only Bennett but the other surrounding counties other than Oglala Lakota County. They said it's over 2 million acres on Pine Ridge Reservation that was taken by illegal taxation. And this is research. So the federal government actually has this information, but then of course they didn't fund. The follow-up was to figure out how to return this land or a solution. So I just want to say that's looming in our history that we can use in some of these meetings, is the 2415 land claims to document the land that was taken through illegal taxation and other methods. So I just wanted to make those points that there are some solutions that have been tried and seem to work. Now, one might think that Bennett County is a tough nut to crack, but I know a lot of those people because my father was from there. He used to work at the Martin Garage at one time. And then through athletics, playing in high school and that, we know the families around there. And so I have a lot of friends there that are white, but who know now they're not like their fathers. They understand civil rights. They understand. And so one other question I have for the panel, is there a legal case that would fight against what they call gerrymandering? Can you bring a legal case on local, like county commissioners, city councils, to demand that certain areas, like you said, where most of the land, where half of the revenue for the district, I think we have some kind of case, if it's possible, to demand that we get representation. So those are just some solutions that I thought of. Thank you.
Who would like to respond?
I'll respond.
Okay. Pass the mic down there if you could, please. Mario Gonzalez.
2415 is Title 28, United States Code, Section 2415. And what it is it's a statute of limitations that was imposed, and there was a deadline, I think around 1982, that all your claims had to be filed by that time. There was no statute of limitations for individuals to sue for like these allotments that were force fee patents. So there was a deadline there, so What happened was Charlie Clome, I think, had the national contract to go and research all the title searches for all these 2415 claims. Now, the tribe also could exclude certain claims from the statute, so we got a list of claims and we submitted them, and they're in the Federal Register saying these claims aren't subject to the statute of limitations if you go look in the Federal Register. So we did do that for our Oglala Sioux tribe back before 1982. So then, basically, it was for these force fee patents that we talked about. Remember, under the Burke Act of 1906, the secretary, we said, formed these commissions, went on, forced these patents on individual lottees before the trust period expired, and in 1922 they canceled them. Well, a lot of these people had these claims for the loss of these allotments, so they had to file these claims before 1982. Well, what happened was Ramon Rubidoux filed one in Rosebud against the Assmans, and I think it was dismissed for, I can't remember the exact grounds of dismissal, but it didn't go anywhere, even though there was, they filed within the statute of limitations. So that's what the 2415 claims are, is basically having individuals file their claims for force fee patents and other, wrongs that were committed against them on their allotments before the, I think, 1982 deadline.
Once again, we're broadcasting live on KILI Radio, and you're watching on KOLC TV, a panel discussion looking at the issues involved with Bennett County. We have with us today Dr. Craig Howell, Mr. Pat Lee, Tatewin Means, and Ted Hamilton, and Mario Gonzalez. We're here at the Woksape Tipi here at Oglala Lakota College's campus on Piya, Wiconi on 3 Mile Creek. I continue on to ask the question, where do we go from here? If there are structural issues involved, is it something that we deal with politically, or is it something that we deal with legally, that we go to court? Where do we go from here? It seems to me that we continue to see a diminishment, or maybe not a diminishment, but pressure around us to diminish whether the land that we have, or the power that we have, or the opportunity to give input. And I'll continue to ask the question, what is the role of the Oglala Lakota Nation in this? Is Bennett County really Lake Creek District, and is an integral part of the Oglala Lakota Nation? Yes, we have Lake Creek District, and I think whereas somebody said that no money from Bennett County has gone into economic development, we have seen Lake Creek District with their tribal council representatives, in particular Craig Dillon, who have, if you look at, you may not be a fan of gaming, but East Wind Casino has brought economic development to the community of Martin and Lake Creek District. Last I knew, they employed as many as 34 people, and they're talking about expanding to a larger site south of town, which could have a restaurant and motel included, and a larger casino with more machines. It could employ more people. Through district initiative and Lake Creek District, we've seen the IHS clinic that's right in Martin, and that was through initiative of Lake Creek District and their tribal council representatives. Again, what is the role of the Oglala Lakota Nation in this? What is the role of individual tribal members who live in the District of Martin? And is this something we can do through the vote, or it has to be done through court? Where do we go from here? I continue to ask that question. I don't see anybody jumping up and down.
I think the answer is yes. I mean, quite frankly, Tom, there are so many issues. There are so many issues that have been brought up by the commissioners in the statements. I mean, this is not a 1 or 2 issue. Put it that way. I mean, we have a tribal college, probably, as far as I'm concerned, the best tribal college there is. But we have a great tribal college here. And we have students who can do research, and we have students who can and do research and actionable research. That needs to be done. Economic development is one aspect. Working with schools is an aspect. Working on land is an aspect. We may find things that require legal action. We may also find things that really just require, as Mr. Means has said, I think more eloquently than any of us, that people just need to sit down and talk to each I don't think there's an either or. I think, and I think, to quote a friend of mine, only Siths thinks in absolutes. There's not an either or. There is opportunity for all of that to be processed through. So I think there is place for legal action where that is necessary, but there's also place for conversation. And the question becomes, you know, it needs, real conversation happens from the people who live in the community. And that's Craig at this table.
That's what I was looking at. Who are they?
And so you know, and I don't want to put that on Craig because Craig can't be the only guy. I'm hoping, and I guess it gets back to what Michelle had said about this conversation today, is that the people who are listening, both on KILI radio and at KOLC, can say to themselves, maybe we are the people who need to get together and talk. So I hope that's what comes out of this today.
Okay.
I've had 3 children graduate from Bennett County High School. Went all 4 years there. And for Baseline, you know, and every day we'd have to go pick them up. They didn't come on the bus. You know, so that was about 4 or 5 years back and forth, from Baseline to Martin. So my kids got pretty well integrated into that school system, made a lot of good friends, lifelong friends with both tribal members and non-Indians. And they're still friends today. They broke down barriers. But there is these Indian programs, which is Johnson O'Malley, I guess, what is it, Title VI, is it? The Education Act, and Impact Aid. There's an advisory group there of Indian parents, supposed to be anyway. And I think you need to involve them because they are in control of those funds. They're supposed to be anyway. I think they used to be advisory, but I think now that they have a lot more input on how those funds are supposed to be spent. So who are those members of that Native American Advisory Committee to the Bennett County School? Is there one? And who are they? They need to be involved because they should know a lot of the issues that are current or within that school system. And that goes to the funding of that school system. But the solution, Tom, is you have to sit across the table with these people and talk to them. Bill Means, I think, explained that good. You never get anywhere without dialogue between parties with different views, different opinions. That's how we resolve them.
There's a microphone.
Use that mic there.
Okay.
That one there.
Any requests? My name is Wendell Yellowbull, and I've been sitting on the Oglala Lakota County, used to be Shannon County Commissioners. I'm the chairman. This is my 3rd term. And the discussion of pay in lieu of taxes has always been on the table. And Bennett County really pushed for that issue. Reason their justification was health care, services that they provided, and they really promoted it in every forum that I attended. And at one forum, I and my Chia here, older brother, we attended a forum where one of the Bennett County representatives, elected commissioners, gets up and comments that majority of the people that are from the Pine Ridge Indian reservations are dysfunctional families. We were there in a public forum. I mean, and I got up and I defended that. And so they reduced it to a few. So what it really comes down to is that, you know, the justification for them is that they want to have absolute authority over the Lake Creek housing, and, you know, they want to have, and it's a conflict. And over the years, I've experienced that when it was Shannon County, and we changed it to Oglala Lakota County, we actually really seen a lot of changes there. And he is right. You have to communicate. Communicate with the constituents there if they're willing to. It takes a voting process. You know, you can, an issue was brought from Bennett County, you collect names, and the commissioners don't vote on it. It's sent to the state and it's put on the ballot. and you vote on it. You can make changes that way. The other thing is, you know, when we did the sheriff, I tell you, when we did the sheriff in Oglala, Lakota County, that was really a hardship on me because that was my first time in politics in a local state government, and it really was tremendously impacted my family a lot. But I stood my ground, and we finally were able to elect a sheriff here by the constituents of the Oglala, Lakota County, because we carry many hats. We carry first our Tioshbai. The other one, we carry our South Dakota residents, county, and membership. So we kind of have a lot of hats that we can exercise in voting and doing what we need to do on behalf of our county. As far as Bennett, I don't know if you have the voting, the voters to change a lot of the questions, you know, on their home rule. I think that's what they're governed by. And at that same time is just collect names and propose those changes. And it's could probably even push harder, but after they changed the name of the Oglala, Lakota County, the state turned around and reacted some more tougher ways to get that name changed, you know, so they respond by that. And we actually, as the county did, we actually employed a deputy state's attorney, which was Tatewin. She still is a state's attorney. You know, and those are the things that we challenge. And the other thing is, working with the tribal government, we actually gave back some of the deeded property that we had, sold it back to the tribe. You know, and those are the things that came out of, I guess I'm a product of the Oglala Lakota College. The end result was I was able to take a look at a lot of things that were there. End result was starting to develop a working relationship. And I talked to Mario several times, what are the possibilities of that, this county actually taking that adjudicated process, you know, becoming a court, and the correction process. And he said, wow, we better kind of take a look at that from afar and really study that. But for me, if we are to exercise our authority as a human being, I think it would be in our best interest to start exercising the Oglala, Lakota County authority first to see how the mechanism actually works. And it's really interesting. The dynamics are there. I've tended with the Bennett County on the issue of the beer being poured on the young people, our young people. I and Art tended. We met with the chief of police. We ended up creating dialogue. We ended up being part of that cultural committee, and we started to really get influence, because I said a lot of times politicians recognize politicians, and I don't know why they do that out there, but I met with the chair lady of Bennett County. She was really energetic, exciting, and we meet with these at these meetings, these county commissioner meetings, and you get to see a lot of what's going on. And there are some, in South Dakota, there are some constituents out there that are sympathetic to of us trying to be part of something, and they are willing to do that. But there are some that are out there that, you know, for us, they really don't want to deal with our issue as Native people. So this was kind of like I wanted to say. And so for me, if you're talking about the PILT money, that's what they call it. They proposed it 3 times so far, and we were entertaining it also. And I was saying that's kind of really something that pay in lieu of taxes. That means basically for all your legal and non-legal. The non-legal is that you guys are the trust property. If you're living on it, we're not getting any taxes from it. So basically, they wanted the federal government to pay for you. You know, they want to give money for it. And property tax, that's what they're asking for. And so for me, it's really important that if you're going to pursue this issue, is first create a dialogue with them. I told Bennett County, the chairman there, I said, if you guys don't want that land, I said, Oglala, Lakota County be willing to take it over. Just sign it over to us. We'll put our land, those stakes over there. He didn't want to do that, but so I guess that's the issue. And I was open to it. I really wanted to get a meeting with them. And I think this is kind of like a vehicle. If we could if you're still pursuing that issue, from the Oglala, Kota County, and Bennett County, having a meeting and taking a look at those issues and see what we can do, you know, be part of that process. So, but we are kind of like the stepchild of the reservation. You know, they say, oh, that's the state, you know, but, you know, I decided to try it out and really got effective with it. So I just wanted to leave you with that comment. Okay?
Thank you, Wendell. We're going to go to Tatewin Means now.
In addition to what everyone else has said, and my Lekshi bill is the community conversations he's talking about. It's the Barbara Schneider Foundation that kind of facilitates those conversations. They are an organization out in Minneapolis, and really they got their start in working with de-escalation techniques for law enforcement and corrections officers, and addressing people with mental illnesses. And so we had them come here to the reservation when I was Attorney General and do some de-escalation training with our corrections officers and law enforcement, as well as like the BIA criminal investigators, to give them that skill set. And we had a series of community conversations here as well, and we'd have them here at Oglala Kota College, and I know Richard Ironclad was a big part of them, and, you know, trying to incite change here on the reservation, transform our communities. And so it's a really valuable process. I must agree that that would be an excellent idea as well for the people of Bennett County, but it really has to be a community grassroots effort. And that's one of the things I think is very difficult, and it's a challenge to all of us, those, especially those in education, because we're raising the next generation of leaders, is how do you instill that sense of civic responsibility, public responsibility, that need to be involved and to be active, because there's such complacency nowadays with all of our generations, that there's that attitude, why would I do that? It's always going to be that way. Nothing's going to change, right? So even if we want people to be members on these commissions and school boards, it's that attitude of it's defeatist, right? It's not going to matter anyway, so why should I be a part of it? So how do we collectively as a nation overcome that? You know, and it has to be in every level of society that's addressing it, all the way down to our Head Start, you know, teaching them what it means to be involved and to be an active citizen, proactive about these things. And just the other comment I wanted to make was, I think that our Oglala Kota Nation as a governing entity has to respond, and has to respond loudly in writing, in responding to this resolution, much like Dr. Howe did. But we're talking about reciting facts. The tribe could recite dozens of facts about what actually happens on our trust land, or what the resources our tribe puts into those trust lands. Those are our members, our residents, that they're talking about in this resolution, and there's no response in writing thus far from the tribe. So as a sovereign perspective, we have to respond. And that's probably how the conversation can initiate, of a government, a nation to state level, to initiate those conversations. Maybe if our people see that leadership, right, and see that initiative, they'll want to be a part of it. They'll have that vehicle to be a part of it. So that's just my additional comment.
You know, one of my thinking while you're talking there is that forever and a day we've heard that the tribal government wants to deal with the federal government but not the state government. And you've gone totally against that we need to be involved.
Absolutely. Definitely, because if we don't, we see things as creeping jurisdiction. We see law enforcement officers coming on our reservation, taking people without following our tribal extradition procedures, totally violating and not respecting our sovereignty. Now, Wendell is right. We opened that conversation between the tribe and Oglala Kota County commissioners, and that's how we were able to come up with that innovative solution to hold non-Indian offenders accountable within our borders, right? So strengthening our sovereignty and being able to prosecute non-Indians that commit crimes here, something that's never before done anywhere in the country. So when you have those conversations, it develops those opportunities and actually strengthens our nation and our boundaries. So it has to happen.
Okay. James, could you grab that mic? Is that working now?
Hello, my name is Jim Redwell. I'm the 5th member of the Oglala Sioux tribe. And as I like to say, when people say, what the heck's a 5th member? I always respond that there's a president, vice president, secretary, treasurer, and then the 5th member. So whatever the other 4 don't want to do falls in my lap, and I can't pass it on. So I have to deal with that. So I suppose in response to all the questions concerning the tribal government side, I've been involved in tribal government, various organizations, as well as living in Martin at a period in my life there, and I was employed with the USDA, the United States Department of Agriculture, and as employee of the Agricultural Stabilization Conservation Service, I had an inside view of the economics of the ag economy of Bennett County. And as employee, the amount of money that pours into Bennett County from the United States government is astronomical. And that is what drives, of course, the U.S., is the economics of a situation. Whether it's conquering other countries, it's all for economics and land. And this is Bennett County's whole story. When they opened up Bennett County in the Dawes Allotment Act, the whole purpose was to make sure that that ag community would benefit from all the land and the force fee patents. My grandfather was one of the ones that used to live in Bennett County when that was first opened up, and he talked about a banker named Holstein, which is now Security First, but I can't remember the name of the bank back then, but he was a loan officer. And those natives are tribal members that wanted to hawk their lands. Holstein was a guy to go to. And it was pennies on the acres that they would hawk their land, and of course couldn't get them out, so that eventually they lost many acres of land. Now the USDA provides a lot of money to the ranchers. I was, as an employee, I was a co-signer on these commodity credit corporation loans to these farmers, and they were like 1.25% interest on these massive amounts of money that these farmers would get to buy land or to buy equipment to run their farms. So now, I always, being a former employee of USDA, I always, when I travel from Pine Ridge back to Wombly, sometimes I take 18. And you see those new bins going up, and I'm always wondering what the price support is for wheat or soybeans or oats or those types of commodities. And you know that they're going up when you see new bins popping up. So as you go into Martin, you see all these new bins. And I used to go out to these bins when these farmers would make loans on these bins to make sure that the bins were all the way up to the top there for them to secure a loan. Now sometimes these farmers, I'd have to give them 3-day notice. Sometimes these farmers didn't want me to come to their place to inspect the bins because they didn't have a full bin. And they would turn their dogs loose, and I'd have to, I made it a point to go to the local locker to get scrap meat and then throw them from a distance and then make it to the bin to examine the bin. So I wasn't too popular after a while because in doing my job, there was a lot of loans that weren't proper. And as a result of that, I don't credit myself, but there was insurance fraud and all that. But getting back to the specifics of Bennett County and what the tribe can do, I was involved in a meeting in White Clay at the end of September. Now the newspapers say there was no tribal representation there, but I ended up being there at the last day of the meeting on a Saturday. And there was a lot of discussion, discourse by members of Nebraska saying, where is the tribe? And what is their involvement in getting White Clay back to a viable economy without alcohol? So that discussion went on, but you know, that was all part of the discussion, as we all mentioned today, that we need to discuss, we need to set across. Education is the whole problem. The state of South Dakota's educational process don't include how tribes entered into treaty agreements which guaranteed rights and certain boundaries. And the state of South Dakota is doing their part in with the propaganda of not putting Bennett County on a map as part of the reservation. Now the government, the U.S. government, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, still recognizes through memorandums that Bennett County is part of the reservation. So the government, U.S. government, BIA specifically, needs to put that in all their maps, and it's all part of colonization on part of Bennett County and the state government and the national government, in showing us that Bennett County is, and this is just a microcosm of what happens across the U.S., that Bennett County is not part of the reservation. Recently, that Allen Road was a point of discussion regarding who was going to pay for what. Bennett County was wanting claim to the jurisdiction on Allen Road off US 18 or Highway 18 to Allen, because they wanted to be responsible for jurisdiction on that road, and the tribe refused to grant that. So for a period of years, that Allen Road was in disrepair. Lives were lost until an agreement was settled. And I don't know if it's settled yet. We clearly have jurisdiction on that road, but the state is putting up a fight. And now it comes down to a legal, the end result is any challenge to what is happening is the last thing we do is legal, because we have many legal battles now, the Oglala Sioux tribe, and to have another legal battle with Bennett County is another strain on our resources. The whole question of gerrymandering. I live in Wombly, and Jackson County refused to have a satellite office in Wombly for national elections until myself, Tom Poorbear, Cheryl Battalion, and Don Doyle, with the Law Project out of D.C., threatened a lawsuit against the state of South Dakota to put that satellite office in Wombly. They finally capitulated before the court took action. So it had to take a court, threatened with court action for them to have a satellite office for the residents to vote in, whereas other counties like Pine Ridge has a satellite office. But they are trying their best not to guarantee basic rights to all the natives in Pine Ridge. And this is across the board in a lot of things. Our reporter here, Mr. Davies here, writes good sports stories. Now, South Dakota State Activities Association is the same thing. They're not a state government, but they're an organization that tries to make sure that the good Indian teams are left out there to against better teams, and the different divisions, that type of thing. Even in sports, you see that. Now, Bennett County is called the Bennett County Warriors. Now, there's a few attempts to change that name also, but we have Indian students that go there. Shakopee invested over $250,000 to build that grade school. So with the amount of money that Bennett County non-members get from the U.S. government, it's the biggest welfare agency in the world, that USDA program. The benefits that these non-members get from USDA, they're the welfare recipients that get the most money. Indians, natives getting a monthly check, that's peanuts compared to the welfare that these non-members get. So with the educational system starting from from the home on up, that's where the non-members have to be educated. They haven't been brought up in an educational society where the true history of relations and how these acts and treaties are made. So with that, I guess that's about what I wanted to cover here. So it's a process that needs to be discussed.
Okay, thank you, Jim. We have past tribal chairman Harold Soway, head of the Oglala Sioux Parks and Recreation Authority currently.
I'm not here in a political capacity, Tom, so don't worry, I'm not running for office. I'm here to talk about the hunting. As part of Parks and Recreation Authority in Kyle, we manage and deal with all the hunts, all the licensing. Recently, a couple of weeks back, we had a meeting in Bennett County, and we had the state game fish and parks officials come. The county commissioner showed up, and they took positions over licensing, hunting, and all the management of the elk over in Bennett County. It's one of what the culmination of that was to set up a memorandum of agreement. And I cautioned them, I told them, and the Bennett County Commissioner agreed with me that we need to proceed cautiously, go back to our governing authority before we proceed any further. Bennett County Commissioner agreed that we need to look at that. And why that's important is hunting and fishing has always been inherent in our traditional way of life. We are part of the natural history here in this land, four-legged, winged bird, and the two-legged. So in that right, we follow the natural laws of our relatives, the Buffalo Nation, the fish, the birds, the four-legged. So then comes a treaty, then all the things that you discussed, and what comes later. And why it's important is they're talking about just revenue and tax. We're talking about a whole universal way of life as traditional society. In order to go back to that way, I believe we need to go back to our Tioshpai system, our traditional lifestyle, who we are, who makes us up, who we are as a traditional people. We have our Tioshpai, that's our traditional government. Then you have positions in those Tioshpai that compose of your traditional government. And that's a whole new topic, but we're working on that quietly. We're developing that. And I thought I better throw that hunting and fishing in there because it's revenue. But again, we have issues in Bennett County and VTEL that are really troublesome. We have a guy who's herding and containing elk herd and profiting, making a lot of money off it. And that's contrary to our people who lives in subsistence hunting to provide for their family. And it's important because that's part of who we are as a people. That's what makes the valor and the earning of feathers and what have you for the men when they hunt. And there's a ritual that goes with the buffalo kill. I mean, there's a whole way of life and philosophy that goes with it. But I want to keep it brief and leave it there, and I felt compelled to make a statement or two since a former politician just got done talking. So Wendell kind of broke the ice, so I thought I better throw something in there. I think you're all my instructors in there, so I wanted to talk to my teachers here. Thank you.
Thank you, Harold.
And thank you, Tom, for allowing me a minute. I am not running. It's not a political statement.
No implications there at all.
The most influential politician.
It's hard to wrap up what we've done today. It's hard to put a fine point to it, but I'd like to give an opportunity for each of our panelists to make some closing comments as we wrap up this panel discussion, which certainly is not ending. And in some ways, this is a continuation of a discussion and needs to continue on. So with that, we'll start with Pat Lee.
Okay, I thank the other panel members here, and I thank everyone for attending this meeting. I think this got off to a very good start. We're getting off to a very good start, just simply by talking about it. Mr. Means emphasized the importance of communicating with each other to see where we're at, and one way to solve problems is to sit down and talk about them and discuss different remedies. And that's what we're looking for, because we're faced with a lot of problems in different areas. We're talking legal, we're talking racial, we're talking economics, we're talking politics. So it just needs to carry on and continue these conversations and communicate with each other.
Thank you, Patrick.
Add to what Patrick just said is that I'd like to thank everyone for being here. I'd like to thank Woksape Tipi for organizing this facility, and Maggie Ross helping out with that, and the other panelists here. It's inspiring to think of the conflation of politics and education and professionalism, and showing the best of our tribal citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig.
I just want to thank everyone for being here, for participating, for KILI and KOLC for broadcasting, so that a lot of the people out there could stay informed and become knowledgeable about what's going on in Bennett County. And thank my fellow panelists up here as well. I learned a lot and was reminded of a lot sitting up here. So I appreciate that. And Maggie Ross for inviting me to sit on the panel. But I just think that there are so many ways, and it's a multifaceted approach, I think, to address this. And there's so many layers, right? And there's that long-term big picture that I don't want us to get lost in, like Dr. Howe said. But, there are strategic things we can do to, get districts in Bennett County so that there's better representation on those commission boards and school boards, all of those strategic things we can do. But I think first and foremost and most swiftly is when we have something as direct and explicitly racist as this resolution, we have to respond quickly and anti-racist and explicitly. I guess I'm a firm believer in that. When you see something racist and you acknowledge it as such, you need to be loud about that, and you need to respond in a loud and an affirmative way, an affirm way. And so I think the tribe definitely has to step up and respond to this. And there are people within the governing structure that have the responsibility to do that, because it's attacking our own citizens and membership, and so that is their duty and responsibility to respond. So I challenge them to do that, and I'm just appreciative of this time. So thank you.
Thank you. Howe? Ted?
Thanks, Tom, and thanks to the folks here at Woksape Tipi, to Maggie, to everybody who put this together. The truth will out. I think the idea of saying we have an opportunity to talk about things, put them out in a factual way, but as Tom has said in his questioning, what's the next step? And so I encourage everybody who's listening, who's watching, to think about what's my next step, whether that's teaching that truth to their children, their tachojas out there, whether that's teaching that to their neighbors who may or may not be Lakota, but being able to say this is our truth and we need to be heard. And I think that's an important thing, and I hope that today is, in a small way, that we have addressed some of that and we can push forward now. So thank you very much, Tom.
I want to thank each of the panelists here. We had Patrick Lee, we had Dr. Craig Howell, we had Tatewin Means, we had Ted Hamilton, and also joined by Mario Gonzalez. I want to thank each of the members of the audience who stepped forward and made comments or had questions. I appreciate their input as well. I want to thank Maggie Ross, who helped put it together, Michelle May, who heads up the Woksape Tipi here, Tawa Dushno, who helped organize. I thank KOLC for being here. More than anything else, as Bill Means said, the importance of the dialogue, and the dialogue has got to continue. This has to only be one part as we move ahead, that the dialogue has to continue. It needs more than just one representative from Bennett County, and it needs representative. I think that Tatewin is definitely right, that the Oglala Lakota Nation needs to step forward and needs to respond as well, and they need to be part of this dialogue very, I think, aggressively. But I thank everybody for their input, and more than anything else, to continue the dialogue. We thank you for participating, and thank our listeners for being there. And thank KOLC. You've been listening to a broadcast live here on KILI FM Radio. We'll send it back to Porcupine Butte and to Mr. Lloyd Bianis. Thank you.
Stand up, I'm singing a honor song, you're all gonna dance. We need to remind Tom we're